Snow fell in thick sheets, covering the market stalls in white. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. She stood in the middle of the alien marketplace, her thin body trembling. Her skin had turned pale from hunger and frost. She had nothing left to sell except the coat she wore, the last piece of warmth she owned. The coat was not much, but it had kept her little girl alive through the freezing nights. Now even that was going. Her small daughter was wrapped in an old blanket, her teeth chattering, eyes dull from hunger. The woman pulled the coat off her own shoulders. The wind bit into her skin instantly, but she kept her face blank. She held out the coat to a merchant. He looked at it, smirked, and gave her a few coins, less than it was worth. She didn't argue. She took the coins and walked to a food stall. The smell of hot bread made her stomach ache, but the money was enough only for one small loaf, stale and hard. She bought it, clutching it close like treasure. The girl reached out for the bread, her tiny hands shaking. The mother smiled faintly and broke the loaf in half. She gave her daughter the bigger piece and kept the smaller part for herself. When she tried to eat, the little girl looked at her and pushed the piece back. "Mama, you eat." The woman shook her head and pressed it into the child's hand. "You need it more." Around them, the market was alive with chatter and bargaining, but no one looked at them with kindness. Some eyes were curious, others cold. One alien man laughed softly when he saw the woman shiver in the wind, now bare-armed. As the sun fell, the wind grew sharper. The woman knew they had no home to return to. Her husband had died in the war months ago, and the small shelter they had was taken by debt collectors. Now, every night was a fight to stay alive. She pulled her daughter close and left the market. The streets were nearly empty, just snow and wind. Her bare arms burned from the cold, and each step was heavier than the last. She walked toward an old bridge at the edge of the town, where the stone arches blocked some of the wind. It was not warm, but it was better than nothing. Under the bridge, she sat on the frozen ground, pulling the blanket tighter around her child. She used her own body as a shield against the wind. The girl curled up against her, still shivering. Night fell completely, the world turning to black and white under the moonlight. The woman tried to keep her eyes open, but her body was so tired. She couldn't sleep, not here, not when the cold could steal them both away. She rubbed her daughter's hands, trying to bring back warmth. The girl's breathing was weak and uneven. Fear twisted in the woman's chest. Then she heard it, footsteps crunching in the snow. Slow, heavy, deliberate. They came closer, stopping just outside the bridge's shadow. She looked up, her heart pounding. A tall figure stood there, half hidden by the darkness. Snowflakes clung to the broad shoulders of his coat. The light from the distant street lamps caught the edge of his face. It was a human. She froze, clutching her daughter tighter. Her people did not trust humans. Some said they were dangerous, others said they were cruel. The man didn't move for a moment. He just stood there, looking at her. His eyes moved from her pale face to the trembling child in her arms. His breath steamed in the air, but his expression was unreadable. He took one slow step forward, then another, crouching down so he was closer to her level. His voice was calm, deep, and strange in her ears. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" She didn't answer. The words stuck in her throat. The man's gaze softened slightly as he reached into his coat. Her muscles tensed. If he pulled out a weapon, she had nothing to defend herself. But instead, he pulled out something small and metal. He pressed a button, and warm steam rose from it. It was a ration pack, hot and fresh. The smell made her stomach twist with longing. The man placed it gently on the ground in front of her and stepped back. He didn't try to touch her or the child. He just said quietly, "It's for you." The woman looked at the ration pack, then at her daughter, whose half-lidded eyes had caught the scent of food. She wanted to refuse, wanted to protect her child from strangers, but the hunger in the girl's face was too strong. She reached for the pack slowly, her fingers brushing the warm surface. The heat seeped into her skin, making her realize how cold she truly was. She opened it and fed her daughter first. The girl took small bites at first, then faster, until the food was gone. The man watched silently, his breath steady in the cold air. He did not smile, but he did not turn away either. Snow fell around them, covering the footprints he had made. When the girl finished, the woman wiped her mouth with the edge of the blanket. She looked at the man again, Unsure what to say, he stood and turned to leave, his heavy boots crunching in the snow. Something inside her pulled. She couldn't just let him go. She rose to her feet, still holding her daughter close, and stepped out from under the bridge. The cold struck her like a blade, but she kept moving. She followed his tracks through the snow, her breaths quick and uneven. The street lamps flickered in the wind. The man walked ahead, tall and steady, but then stopped suddenly. She froze when she saw why. In front of him, 4 alien men stepped out from the shadows, blocking the road. Their hands rested on weapons, their eyes fixed on the human. The man didn't move back. His shoulders squared and his voice came out sharp and clear. "If you're here for trouble, you found it." The woman's heart raced. She tightened her hold on her daughter and stepped behind a pile of snow, watching. The wind howled around them, and for a moment it felt like the cold night itself was holding its breath. The woman's breath came out in small clouds as she stood in the shadows, clutching her daughter. The human faced the 4 alien men without fear. One of them stepped forward, his voice low and threatening. "Hand over your supplies, human. Walk away, and we won't hurt you." The man didn't move. His gloved hands stayed loose at his sides, but there was a sharpness in his eyes. "You'll have to try harder than words," the alien leader hissed, pulling a long, curved blade from his belt. The others spread out, cutting off any escape. The woman's heart pounded. She had no way to help him, yet something in her chest twisted at the thought of watching him fall. One of the aliens lunged first, aiming for the man's chest. In a blur, the human sidestepped, grabbed the attacker's wrist, and twisted. A sharp cry rang out as the weapon dropped into the snow. The human kicked it away before the alien could recover. Another came from behind, swinging a metal pipe. The man ducked low, his coat brushing the snow, and drove his shoulder into the alien's stomach. The force sent the attacker stumbling back, coughing. The leader rushed in, blade raised high. This time, the man caught his arm mid-swing, twisting until the blade clattered to the ground. With one swift move, he shoved the leader into a wall of ice, the sound echoing through the empty street. The last thug hesitated, glancing at his fallen companions, then turned and ran into the shadows. The others followed, limping and cursing under their breath. Snowflakes quickly began to cover their footprints. The human straightened, breathing hard but steady. He looked toward the woman's hiding place. "If you're coming with me," he said in a calm but firm voice, "stay close." Her legs felt heavy, but she stepped forward. The little girl buried her face in her mother's neck, still frightened. The woman's bare arms burned in the cold wind, and every step sent a shiver through her. She hesitated again, wondering if she should trust him. The man began walking without looking back. She stood still for a moment longer, staring at his tall frame moving through the snow. The little girl whispered weakly, "Mama, please?" That was enough. She hurried after him, her feet sinking deep into the snow. They walked through silent streets, the wind cutting through every gap in her blanket. The human led the way, his steps confident, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Every so often, he glanced over his shoulder to make sure they were still behind him. After what felt like hours, he stopped in front of a low, half-buried building at the edge of town. The walls were dented, and part of the roof had caved in, but faint light glowed from inside. "It's an old outpost," he said. "No one uses it now." He pushed open the door, letting them step inside. The air was warmer, though it still smelled of rust and dust. A small heater hummed in the corner, and a few blankets were stacked on a crate. He pulled one out and handed it to her. "Wrap her in this. She needs heat fast." She didn't argue. She took the thick blanket and wrapped her daughter tightly, feeling some of the trembling stop. The man took off his gloves and started checking the heater, adjusting the dials. The soft light lit his face, showing lines of fatigue but also a strange calm. He didn't act like he was doing her a favor. He acted like this was simply what needed to be done. Her stomach growled. The sound was loud in the quiet room, and she felt her cheeks flush. He pulled out another ration pack and placed it in front of her. "Eat." She shook her head, pointing at her daughter. He gave a faint sigh and opened the pack himself, breaking it in half. "Both of you." His voice left no room for argument. The food was warm and soft. The little girl ate slowly at first, then faster, and soon her eyes began to close, her body relaxing. The woman finished the rest of the pack quietly, her hands still cold but her chest feeling lighter. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the heater and the soft breathing of the child. Then he asked, "What's your name?" She hesitated, then said it softly, her voice carrying the weight of months of silence. He nodded, not asking more. "I'll go find more supplies tomorrow," he said. "You should rest tonight." She wanted to ask why he was helping them, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she nodded. Hours later, she was woken by the sound of the door opening. The man wasn't back yet. Her heart tightened. She pulled her daughter closer, ready to run if she had to. Footsteps came closer. Then, a sharp knock on the door. It wasn't the same rhythm the human had used. It was slow, heavy, and deliberate. A deep voice spoke from outside, using her name. "Open the door. We need to talk." Her blood turned cold. She recognized that voice. It belonged to a man she had hoped never to see again. The one who had driven her into this life of misery. The one who had taken everything from her after her husband died. She held her daughter tight, her mind racing. The voice outside grew harder. "I know you're in there. Open up, or I'll come in myself." Her hands shook as she looked for something, anything, to defend herself. A broken piece of metal pipe lay near the wall. She picked it up and moved her daughter behind a stack of crates. The door creaked as someone outside began to push it open. She raised the pipe, ready to fight, even though she knew she had little chance. Before the door could fully open, it slammed back with a loud crash. The human stood there, snow covering his coat and shoulders, carrying a small pack of supplies. His eyes went straight to her, then to the doorway. Behind him, the shadow of the man outside loomed large. The human's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "You've got 5 seconds to leave." The silence that followed felt like the whole night was holding its breath. Snow swirled around the doorway as the two men faced each other. The human stood just inside, blocking the alien from entering. The widow gripped the metal pipe tighter, her heart pounding in her ears. Her daughter's small fingers clutched the back of her shirt from behind the crates. The alien outside had a heavy build, his broad shoulders filling the frame of the door. His eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with anger. "Step aside, human. This is not your business." The human didn't move. His gaze stayed steady, his voice low but sharp. "If you've come to threaten them, it is my business." The alien's lip curled. "That woman owes me more than you can imagine. Debts don't vanish because she hides under your roof. Hand her over, and maybe I let you walk away." The woman's stomach twisted at his words. She remembered the nights he had come to her door, demanding payment, taking whatever little she had. Selling her coat was nothing compared to the things she had already lost because of him. The human stepped forward until he was nearly chest to chest with the alien. "You have 5 seconds to leave. I don't like repeating myself." The alien laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Or what? You think you can fight me and walk away breathing?" The man didn't answer with words. His right hand shot out, grabbing the alien's collar, yanking him forward into the dim light. With his other hand, he slammed the door frame with enough force that snow shook loose from the roof. The alien tried to swing a punch, but the human sidestepped and drove his fist into the alien's ribs. The sound of the impact was muffled by the thick coat, but the grunt that followed was real. The alien staggered back, clutching his side. "You don't belong here," the human said, his tone like ice. "Leave now, or you'll regret staying." The alien's expression twisted with rage. He pulled a short blade from his belt and lunged. The widow gasped, stepping out slightly from her hiding place. The human moved fast, faster than she could follow. He caught the alien's wrist mid-strike, twisted it upward, and forced the blade toward the ground. With a sharp motion, he knocked the weapon away into the snow outside. The alien roared and shoved the human backward, trying to force his way inside. The human planted his boots, absorbing the shove. Ryan then delivered a hard kick to the alien's knee. The alien dropped slightly, his balance broken. The human seized that moment, grabbing him by the coat and spinning him toward the open night. The alien stumbled into the snow, falling to one knee. His breath came out in angry clouds, but he didn't get up right away. He glared at the human, his voice shaking with fury. "This isn't over. I'll come back, and when I do, you won't be able to protect her." The human didn't flinch. "Try it, and you won't leave the ground next time." The alien got to his feet slowly, his heavy boots crunching in the snow as he backed away. His shadow melted into the dark storm until only the sound of the wind remained. The human shut the door firmly, locking it. His breath was steady, but his eyes were still sharp, scanning the room. He looked at the woman, who still held the metal pipe like her life depended on it. "You all right?" She nodded, though her body was still shaking. The little girl peeked from behind the crates, her eyes wide and fearful. The human crouched down to her level, his voice softer. "It's okay. He's gone." The girl hesitated, then stepped out, still clinging to her mother. The woman's gaze followed the man, her mind full of questions. She didn't understand why he had risked himself for them. She had seen many turn away before. He set the supplies down on a crate and started unpacking them. There was more food, a flask of water, and a few strips of dried meat. He handed one to the girl, who took it quietly. She finally found her voice. He will come back. He always comes back." The man looked at her with a calm certainty that made her pause. "Then we'll be ready. But we can't stay here forever. At first light, we move." Her chest tightened. Moving meant leaving the little corner of shelter they had found. It meant stepping into the unknown again. "Where?" she asked. "There's a human relief camp," he said. "If we reach it, you'll be safe. They won't let him near you." The girl chewed slowly, listening. The woman wanted to believe him, but she had learned not to trust easily. Still, something about his voice, solid, unshaken, made her want to try. The wind rattled the loose boards in the walls. The human checked the heater, adjusting it so the small room stayed warm through the night. He handed her another blanket, this one rough but thick. She wrapped it around her daughter, feeling the warmth spread slowly. He sat on the floor near the door, his back to the wall, his eyes half closed but still alert. She realized he was positioning himself so no one could enter without going through him first. Hours passed like that. Quiet, broken only by the wind outside. The woman dozed lightly, waking every time the snow shifted against the walls. Once, she thought she heard distant footsteps, but when she looked, the human was still in place, unmoving, watching the door. Near dawn, the faintest light seeped through the cracks. The human stood, stretching his shoulders. "Time to go," he said. She helped her daughter to her feet. The child still looked sleepy, but less pale than the night before. They gathered what little they had, the blanket, a piece of bread, the small pack the man had brought. Before opening the door, the human glanced outside, scanning the white-covered street. "Stay close. Don't talk unless you have to." The cold hit them instantly, making her gasp. Snow was still falling, though lighter now, and the streets were empty. The human led them through narrow alleys, keeping to the shadows. Every step crunched softly underfoot, and every sound felt louder than it should. Once, she saw movement at the far end of a street, a dark figure watching them, but when she blinked, it was gone. She didn't know if it was her imagination or the man from last night. They kept moving, the wind stinging her face. She didn't ask where they were anymore. She just followed, her daughter held tightly in her arms, trusting that wherever this human was taking them, it had to be better than the cold and the fear they were leaving behind. Snow crunched softly beneath their feet as they moved through the narrow back streets. The wind was quieter now, but the air still bit at exposed skin. The human walked ahead, scanning each corner before he let them follow. The woman held her daughter close, her arms aching, but she didn't slow down. She didn't dare. After almost an hour of walking, he finally stopped in front of another building, low, with walls patched by different metals, as if repaired many times. A faint light glowed inside. He glanced around the empty street, then pushed the door open and motioned for them to enter. Inside, the air was warmer than she expected. The walls were lined with old storage shelves, and in the center sat a small working heater. There were 2 crates stacked in the corner with blankets folded on top. The place looked abandoned, but it was cleaner than the last shelter. The man closed the door quickly and locked it. "We'll stay here for now," he said quietly. "Rest. We'll move again when the storm clears." The woman lowered her daughter onto one of the crates, wrapping her tightly in a thick blanket. The little girl's eyes were heavy with sleep, but her breathing was steady now. The man pulled another blanket from the pile and tossed it to the woman. "For you. You're shaking." She hesitated before taking it. Wrapping it around her shoulders, she felt the cold loosen its grip. Her fingers still ached, but the warmth was slowly returning. He crouched near the heater, checking its settings. The soft orange glow lit the side of his face, showing lines of exhaustion beneath his eyes. He didn't speak much, and his movements were quiet and precise. For a while, there was only silence, broken by the faint hum of the heater. The woman studied him, wondering why a human soldier was helping her. In her world, humans had their own troubles. They didn't take in strangers from another race. Finally, he spoke without looking at her. "She's strong, your daughter. Not many kids would last out there." The woman's voice was low. "She's all I have." He glanced at her for a brief moment before turning back to the heater. "Then you fight for her. That's good." The words stayed in her head, heavy but not unkind. She wanted to tell him more, to explain how she had ended up in this situation, but fear still kept her quiet. Trust was something she had lost long ago. The man stood and began unpacking a small bag he carried. He set out another ration pack, a flask of water, and a few dried strips of meat. He handed the meat to the woman. "Eat. You need strength too." She shook her head, gesturing toward her daughter. He frowned slightly. "She'll get her share. You're no good to her if you collapse." His tone was firm, almost like an order. She took the meat slowly, chewing it in small bites. The warmth from the food spread through her chest, easing the tightness there. After a while, the man took out a small piece of cloth and began cleaning the knife he carried. His hands moved with practiced ease, his eyes focused. She noticed scars on his knuckles, the kind left by too many fights. "You're not safe here," he said suddenly. "That man from last night, he won't let this go. He'll come looking." Her fingers tightened on the blanket. "He always does." The man's gaze met hers. "Then we make sure he can't follow. I'll take you to the human camp. They have rules, protection. He won't get near you there." The thought of safety felt strange, almost impossible. She had been running for so long that she didn't know if she could believe it. But she saw no lie in his eyes, only a steady certainty. He stood and moved toward the door. "I'll check the area. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it unless I say my name." Her heart jumped. "You're leaving?" "Only for a short time. We need more supplies if we're going to make it to the camp." She didn't want him to go. The moment he stepped outside, she would be alone again, and the fear that had been quiet would roar back. But she only nodded. He stepped out into the snow, pulling the door shut behind him. She locked it quickly, pressing her back against the wood. The sound of his footsteps faded into the distance. Minutes passed. The room felt colder without him, though the heater was still running. The woman sat beside her daughter, running her fingers through the child's hair. Outside, the wind had begun to rise again, rattling the thin walls. She tried to focus on the sound of the heater, but every noise made her tense. An hour passed. The snow outside muffled all sound, making the silence too deep. She began to wonder if something had happened to him. Then there was a knock at the door. Not fast, not loud, just 3 slow, heavy knocks. Her chest tightened. That wasn't his knock. He had knocked only once before speaking his name. The voice that came next made her blood run cold. "Open up. You can't hide in there forever." She recognized it instantly. The debt collector, the man who had taken everything from her after her husband died. Her daughter stirred, sensing her mother's fear. The woman pressed a finger to her lips, urging her to stay quiet. The voice outside grew harder. "If you don't open this door, I'll break it down. And when I do, you'll wish you had come quietly." Her hands shook as she looked around for something to defend herself. The only thing close was a rusted piece of metal from a broken shelf. She grabbed it, holding it tight. The door rattled as the man outside tried the handle. "I know you're in there. You think that human can save you? He won't be back in time." Her heart raced. She moved her daughter behind a stack of crates, whispering for her not to make a sound. The girl's eyes were wide, her small hands gripping the blanket. The door began to creak under pressure. Snowflakes drifted in through the gap as it slowly opened. She raised the metal in her hands, ready to fight, even though she knew she had little chance. But before the door could swing all the way, it slammed shut again, with a force that made the walls shake. The human stood there, snow clinging to his coat and shoulders, carrying a pack of supplies. His eyes moved from her to the doorway, where the shadow of the debt collector still lingered. His voice was cold, controlled. You've got 5 seconds to leave. The room went silent, except for the sound of the wind outside. The alien outside did not move at first. His shadow filled the doorway, his breath rising in thick clouds in the cold air. He tilted his head slightly, his voice low and mocking. You're protecting her? Do you even know who she is? The human didn't blink. I know enough, and I know you have 3 seconds left. A short laugh came from the alien. You think you can scare me? I've taken everything from her before. I can do it again. Now step aside before I... The man's hand shifted toward his weapon. 2 seconds. The alien's eyes narrowed. His hand twitched toward the knife at his belt, but the human moved first. In one quick motion, he stepped forward, grabbed the alien by the front of his coat, and yanked him into the room just far enough to slam him against the doorframe. The impact made a dull thud, and snow from the roof above drifted down between them. The alien grunted in pain, his teeth bared. You're making a mistake, human. The woman stood frozen, the metal bar still clutched in her hands. Her daughter was hidden behind the crates, her small eyes peeking out in fear. The alien tried to push back, but the human's grip was iron. Leave, the man said, his voice like stone. The alien snarled and swung a punch, but the man ducked, shoving him hard toward the snow outside. The alien stumbled, but caught himself, glaring in. You can't guard her forever. I'll be back, and next time, I won't be alone. The human stepped into the doorway, his figure blocking the light. Next time, you won't walk away. For a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then the alien turned sharply and trudged into the white storm, disappearing into the swirling snow. The man closed the door and locked it, his shoulders tense. He set the bag of supplies down on the crate, his eyes still hard. The woman's hands were trembling. She lowered the metal bar slowly. He means it. He will come back. The man looked at her, steady and calm. Then we'll make sure he can't follow us. She swallowed, feeling the weight of those words. You don't know what he's done. After my husband died, he came, said my husband owed him. I had nothing, but he kept taking. Food, clothes, anything. Even what little I could trade for my daughter's medicine. The man listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on hers. He's the reason I'm out here, she said, her voice shaking. The reason I had to sell everything, even my coat. The man's jaw tightened. Then it's over. I'll pay your debt. She stared at him, confused. You can't pay him. He won't accept money. He wants control. The man's voice dropped, cold and certain. Then I'll take that from him too. Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken like that for her, not since her husband. She didn't know if she should feel relief or fear. He pulled a blanket from the pile and tossed it toward her. Get some rest. We leave at first light. We'll move fast. The woman hesitated before wrapping herself and her daughter in the blanket. The warmth of the fabric felt strange after so many nights of cold. The man sat near the door again, his weapon within reach, watching the shadows under the frame. His posture told her he wasn't going to sleep. Hours passed slowly. Outside, the storm softened, the wind now just a whisper against the metal walls. But inside, the air felt heavy with the knowledge that danger was still close. When dawn's pale light began to seep in, the man stood. Time to go. She helped her daughter to her feet, wrapping her tightly in the blanket. The little girl's face was pale but determined. Before leaving, the man handed her a piece of bread. Eat it now. You'll need the strength. She broke it in half and gave the larger piece to her daughter. The girl smiled faintly, chewing as they stepped into the snow. Sure, the streets were quiet, covered in fresh white powder. Their footprints were the first to mark the ground. The man led them down narrow alleys, avoiding the main roads. His eyes moved constantly, scanning every shadow, every rooftop. The woman followed closely, her daughter clinging to her side. She kept looking over her shoulder, half expecting to see the debt collector's dark shape emerging from the snow. They passed abandoned stalls, frozen fountains, and broken signs swaying in the wind. Once, a sound made the woman's heart jump, a muffled crunch like a boot on snow. But when she looked, there was nothing. After nearly an hour, the man slowed, lifting a hand for them to stop. He crouched behind a low wall, peering around the corner. The woman moved closer, careful to keep her daughter hidden. She saw them, 2 figures standing in the street ahead, dressed in heavy coats, weapons slung across their backs. They weren't moving, they were waiting. The man's voice was low. He's already sent people to block the road. Her stomach dropped. What now? He looked at her, his eyes calm but sharp. We take another path, one they won't expect. She didn't know what he meant until he led them toward a half-collapsed building. Inside, the air was stale and cold, but there was a hole in the floor leading to a narrow tunnel. It's an old supply route, he explained. Takes us under the street. It's tight, but it's safer than walking into an ambush. The woman glanced at the dark tunnel and then at her daughter. She's small enough, but will it hold? It will, he said simply. Stay close to me. They climbed down into the narrow passage. The walls were damp, and the smell of old earth and rust filled the air. The sound of their breathing echoed faintly. The man moved ahead, his flashlight cutting through the dark. Behind him, the woman followed, holding her daughter tight. Every few steps, she heard muffled noises above them, boots crunching on snow, voices calling out. The debt collector's men were close, but they didn't know where to look. The tunnel stretched on, bending sharply to the left. The man slowed, listening. Then he motioned for them to stop. The woman held her breath. Somewhere above, heavy footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a faint scraping sound, as if someone was dragging metal across stone. The man's voice was almost a whisper. Keep moving. Quietly. They moved deeper into the tunnel, their steps slow and careful. Each sound felt too loud, but the dark seemed to swallow them whole. When they finally saw the faint light ahead, the woman's chest loosened. The man climbed up first, checking the street before helping them out. They emerged into a quieter part of the town, far from the guarded road. The snow here was untouched. For the first time in days, the woman felt a small spark of hope. But as they began walking again, she caught sight of something in the distance. 3 figures moving slowly through the snow, their faces hidden. She didn't need to ask who had sent them. The man saw the movement ahead at the same time she did. He slowed his steps, his eyes narrowing as he counted the shapes in the snow. 3 figures, moving steadily, blocking the path they needed to take. Their coats were heavy, their faces hidden by masks, but their hands stayed close to their weapons. He stopped and turned slightly toward her. Stay behind me. Don't speak. She clutched her daughter tighter, her heart pounding. The snow under their boots made a soft crunch with every step. The wind had calmed, and the silence felt heavier than before. The 3 men spread out, forming a wall across the street. One of them called out, his voice muffled by the mask. The woman. Hand her over, and you can walk away. The human didn't answer. He stepped forward slowly, his boots leaving deep prints in the snow. His gloved hand rested near the weapon at his side, but he didn't draw it yet. The man in the center tilted his head. You think she's worth dying for? The human's voice was calm, cold. I think you're about to find out. The one on the left moved first, pulling a short blade from his belt and charging forward. The human sidestepped quickly, grabbed his wrist, and slammed him into the wall of a nearby building. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and the blade fell into the snow. The second man raised a long metal pipe and swung it down. The human caught it mid-swing, twisting hard until the attacker's grip broke. He shoved the pipe backward into the man's chest, forcing him to stumble several steps before collapsing into the snow. The third man hesitated for a heartbeat, then reached for his sidearm. The woman's breath caught in her throat. The human moved like a shadow, closing the distance in seconds, grabbing the weapon and shoving the man backward. They both landed hard, the human's knee pressing into the attacker's arm until the gun slipped free. He stood, tossing the weapon into the snow, far out of reach. Tell your boss, he said sharply. Next time, I won't be this polite. The 3 men scrambled to their feet, their eyes flicking between him and the woman. None of them dared to try again. They turned and disappeared into the falling snow, their shapes fading into the white. The woman's hands were shaking as she stepped forward. Her daughter's face was buried against her shoulder, trying not to look. The human checked the street, making sure they were alone again, then motioned for her to follow. They kept moving, this time faster. The streets here were narrower, the buildings older, their windows dark and cracked. The man glanced at the sky. Clouds were thickening again. Snow's coming back, he said. We need to reach the camp before nightfall. She wanted to ask how far it was, but she stayed silent, saving her breath for walking. Her legs ached and her arms felt heavy from carrying her daughter, but she didn't slow down. They reached a small courtyard, its stone floor hidden under a thick layer of snow. The human stopped suddenly, raising a hand. She froze. At first, she didn't see anything. Then she heard it, the crunch of snow behind them. Slow, deliberate, unhurried. When she turned, her stomach sank. A tall, broad figure was walking toward them from the far end of the street. Even from here, she recognized the shape of his coat, the way he moved. The debt collector. He stopped a few steps away, his face half covered by a scarf, but his eyes were sharp and fixed on her. "Did you think you could hide forever?" The human stepped in front of her, his voice flat. "This is your last warning. Turn around." The debt collector laughed, low and harsh. "You can't keep her. She owes me, and I always collect what's mine." "She's not yours," the human said, his tone like steel. The man's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret saying that." Without another word, the debt collector pulled a blade from his belt and rushed forward. The human met him halfway, their boots sending snow flying as they collided. The woman backed away, clutching her daughter, her heart racing. The two men moved fast, too fast for her to follow every strike and block. The sound of fists hitting coats, boots slamming into snow, and metal scraping against leather filled the courtyard. The human caught the debt collector's arm and tried to twist it, but the man was strong. He shoved back hard, forcing the human to take a step away. Then he swung the blade in a wide arc. The human ducked, grabbing the man's wrist and slamming it into a wall. The blade dropped, landing in the snow with a dull thud. The debt collector roared in anger, throwing a heavy punch. The human blocked it with his forearm, then drove his elbow into the man's ribs. The blow forced him back a few steps, gasping for air. "This ends now," the human said, his voice low but deadly. The debt collector's eyes darted toward the woman and her daughter. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Then maybe I'll take the girl instead." The human moved before the words had even faded. He grabbed the man by the front of his coat and threw him to the ground with a force that shook the snow loose from the rooftops. Before the debt collector could rise, the human pressed a knee into his chest and held him there. "You will never come near them again," the human said. "If I see you, if I hear your name, it ends for you." The man beneath him spat into the snow, but didn't answer. His silence said enough. The human stood and stepped back, his eyes never leaving him. "Go." The debt collector got to his feet slowly, his gaze still full of hate. He backed away, disappearing into the storm. The human turned to the woman. "We keep moving. He won't stop, but neither will I." She nodded, her throat tight. Her daughter's small hand gripped hers, and she could feel the trust in that hold. They walked on, the snow falling harder now, covering their tracks almost as soon as they made them. The wind whistled between the buildings, carrying away the last echoes of the fight. For the first time, the woman felt something she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. But deep inside, she knew the danger was far from over. The man they had just faced wasn't the kind to give up, and the storm around them was only growing stronger. Snow fell in thick curtains, covering the streets faster than they could walk. The cold was sharper now, biting into every bit of exposed skin. The man kept his pace steady, glancing over his shoulder every few steps to make sure they were still behind him. The woman held her daughter close under the blanket, her legs aching, but her mind fixed on one thought: reaching the human camp before night. The wind howled around the corners of broken buildings. Several times, she thought she heard footsteps behind them, but when she looked, there was only swirling snow. Her nerves were tight, and each sound made her heart beat faster. After another long stretch of walking, the man finally pointed ahead. Through the haze of snow, faint lights glowed in the distance. "That's the camp," he said. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of urgency. "We have to move faster." Her heart lifted, and she adjusted her grip on her daughter, pushing herself to keep pace. The girl's head rested on her shoulder, eyes half closed, but there was warmth in her small body now, not the dangerous cold from before. The lights grew brighter as they approached. Tall fences came into view, lined with metal panels and guard posts. 2 human soldiers stood near the gate, their weapons slung across their chests. When they spotted the man, one of the guards stepped forward. "You're late," he said, his eyes scanning the woman and the child. "And who are they?" "They're with me," the man replied, his voice leaving no room for argument. The guard's eyes narrowed. You know the rules. Aliens don't just walk in here. The man took a step closer, his voice dropping but firm. Open the gate. The second guard shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. We'll have to check with... The man cut him off. No, you'll open it now. She's under my protection. That's all you need to know. There was a long moment of silence. The wind hissed against the metal walls, the snow swirling in tight circles at their feet. Finally, the first guard sighed and waved to the control panel. The gate creaked open, letting them through. Inside, the air didn't feel warmer, but there was shelter from the wind. Rows of small cabins stood neatly in lines, their windows glowing faintly. Smoke curled from a few chimneys. People moved quietly between buildings, most bundled in heavy coats, some stopping to stare at the newcomers. The man led them toward one of the cabins near the center of the camp. He pushed the door open, letting the woman and her daughter step inside first. The room was small but clean, with a simple bed, a table, and a heater already running in the corner. You can stay here, he said. No one will bother you. The woman lowered her daughter onto the bed. The girl's eyes fluttered open, and she looked around the room with wonder. It's warm, she whispered. The woman turned to the man, her voice quiet. Why are you doing this for us? He stood near the door, snow still melting from his coat. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he said, because no one helped my mother when she needed it. His voice was steady, but there was something heavy in his eyes. She felt a lump form in her throat. Thank you, she said softly. He gave a small nod. Rest. You're safe here now. He turned to leave, but before he could step outside, the little girl slid off the bed and ran to him. She wrapped her small arms around his leg and whispered, Papa! The man froze for a second, then slowly crouched down. His gloved hand rested gently on her shoulder. You take care of your mama now, all right? She nodded seriously before letting go. The man stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The woman stood at the window, watching him walk toward the gates again, his figure disappearing into the snow. That night, she slept deeply for the first time in months, her daughter warm beside her. But the peace didn't last. In the early hours, a sound woke her, faint at first, then louder. Voices shouting from the direction of the gates. She moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside. Through the swirling snow, she saw shadows moving, too many to count. Figures were gathering outside the camp fence, their shapes shifting in the storm. Her heart sank. Even from this distance, she could see the broad outline of the man leading them. The debt collector. The wind carried his voice over the wall. You think a fence will keep me out? She belongs to me. The guards shouted back, weapons raised, but she could see hesitation in their movements. The man at the gate was already arguing with them, his stance tense and ready. She turned to her sleeping daughter, her hands trembling. They had made it to safety, or so she thought. But now the danger was back, closer than ever. Outside, the human who had saved them stood facing the enemy again, his body a barrier between them and the man who would never stop hunting them. The snow kept falling, the wind kept howling, and the night was far from over.